Welcome back to the Crystal Cocoon. This is Jessie, and I'm here with Hannah Neal and Brandon, my co-hosts. Today we're doing a show called Intuition and Sensory Building. We thought, following up our last episode of talking about modalities and senses, and still in an attempt to answer that question of what do you do and how do you do it and why, we had another person ask a similar question. So we just thought we would put that in today with our question of the week. It came from Noelani Rodriguez, who's a psychic and Akashic record reader, who, when I first met her, she had commented to me, she had remarked how different it was that I was a reader and a healer. And it really was this question that made me wonder, because I don't know how you can be a healer without being a reader. And I'm not sure how you can read without wanting to do something with what you see. So it was kind of shocking to me. It made me realize, we all do work very differently. Interesting. And when I started getting readings from these people who are readers, wow, they read in a completely different way than I'm capable of. And Noelani especially, she goes places I'm floored at. I had no idea about. So her specific question was, let me read it. What are you most excited about creating with clients? Why and how? So I'll pose that out there to you guys and see what you guys want to say.
Oh, you're going to answer it first?
Well, I could. Okay, I will. Let's see. So what do I hope to accomplish with my clients? We've really been doing a lot of work on this recently as we're building our business, a lot of questioning of what is it that I think I'm doing here. And for myself, what I want to accomplish with my clients is I want them to feel empowered about their own expression, their own life. I want them to feel like instead of that things happen to them, that they create what's going on around them, and really to take that truth all the way in, even in the parts that hurt. And I want to guide them through that process. So that's really what I do as a healer, is really help people to open these parts up that they've never really been able to look at before, by really giving them the truths that they're afraid to hear, and then giving them tools with which to work with that. How do I do that? Because there's so much that we don't feel, because what do I do with it once I start feeling it? It's gonna, if I check into that, a lot of my clients are trauma recovery, lots of abuse, really pretty traumatic abuse and neglect and extreme violence in their history. So a lot of dissociative people come to me, which isn't surprising, as I have come through a lot of my own journey with dissociation. So the fear is, if I take this feeling in, it's going to overwhelm me. And so holding that space with them while they take that feeling in, and showing them, no, it's not overwhelming you, and it's that holding that's actually making it stay, and working them through. So that's in a nutshell what I do, and why, and or how I do it. And why? Because I look at people and I see the most amazing individuals in every one of them, and I want to help them bring that part out and clean off all that debris that they got on them from their families, from their friends, from their experiences, from their own beliefs and fears, and help them see what I see when I look at them. So that's me.
I think a lot of us have a very similar, intention about what we're doing here. For me, when I'm most excited about, and that was the interesting part about this question, I was like, most excited. Oh, do I have to just pick one thing that's most exciting about where I'm at right now? Because we talk about the people who we attract. Mm-hmm. I also attract people who have trauma histories. I tend to attract people who are really strong and ultra-sensitive, empathic people, mm-hmm. which often comes with its own set of issues, challenges, things to be aware of. The other thing that that's part of all of that is that's a reflection of who I am and how I show up in this world. And so a lot of times what I'm most excited about is the the duality that we're going to be working in. We'll be attracting people so that we can empower them to live their purpose authentically with who they are and blend who they are as part of their life, that they don't have to keep those things separate, that I can be a spiritual person, I can have this awareness, and I can actually work a job if I need to. Mm-hmm. I can go out into the world and I can do the things I need to. I can go to the grocery store and I can show up as an empathic person and be empowered in that. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's really exciting because that's still things I am learning to do, to integrate myself more fully into my experience. Who I am and what I do are finally becoming integrated for me. And for me, that's finding a level of wholeness on this planet. And that's really invigorating for me. So the more I do that, the more I can show up for other people and help guide them so that they can find that level of empowerment too. So they can show up on this planet with their purpose and feel really empowered to live that purpose and do the things that they're supposed to do in this world. And that for me is I always tell people when they say thank you, I'm like, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. You showed up here. It's a sacred honor to do this work. Like, this is me living my purpose so that you can live your purpose, so that other people can live their purpose. And it just goes on and on and on. And that's, for me, reinvigorating that passion for life and living and being present. That's where it's at.
For me, I'm most excited about creating powerful, effective, and lasting transformation in clients. Mm-hmm. I really love when somebody's ready and willing and open to take wherever they're at in their life to the next level and willing to do what it takes to get there. I really love working with those clients because they're so much easier to work with, but I really love the change that comes out of it. Because when somebody comes to me like that, it usually involves some sort of shift, like dramatic shift, often in their consciousness. And I just get excited about seeing like what level they can take themselves to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I'll sometimes that involves healing and stuff like that. But even like the healing work, usually the people that come with me, there's always a shift in their consciousness. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
I love watching people wake up.
I do too.
Just that process of when I I'll do it usually my first sessions with clients. There's a lot of fear that they're feeling. They're not sure what I'm even going to do. They're afraid of what's going to happen, what's going to come up. There's usually a lot of things they're really terrified of facing. So that first session is usually just so full of fear, really. Yeah. And so we do a lot of that kind of that work of clearing through that. And so my second session with them is usually like, oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened. Oh my God, I had this and that. And then I saw this. And I was just working with a woman yesterday, actually, a brand new person to me. And she's in Bolivia and Bulgaria. I think it's Bulgaria, actually. And she was telling me, I feel this real strong urge to, be a healer. I want to be a healer. And I said, okay, well, let's start with you first. And she goes, well, I want to learn how to do it for other people. And I said, well, the first part of learning to heal for other people is learning to heal yourself. And she said, well, no, I don't need to be healed. I'm good. My body doesn't have anything wrong with it. And I was like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and start. And I walked her through and the net, like maybe 25, 30 minutes later, she contacted me back and she was like, oh my God, I do need to heal myself first. That was amazing. I had no idea. All of my anxiety is gone. All of my fear is gone. I have never felt this clear before. And I think I hear my mother, her passed away mother. And so through the course of that day, she would message me back and she's just, all the different energies she's feeling coming to her now that she's grounding herself and connecting to herself and opening up. It was just this explosion waiting for her to tap into it. And that was like, yes.
See, I just love that. I really do love that. That's one of the biggest joys I get is seeing somebody experience that and open to that for the first time and seeing their life transform out of that.
It's like better than crack.
It is.
Not that I've tried crack. That kind of crack.
We all remember.
I mean, I imagine it is.
Sure, Brandon. We got that.
Being that I'm empathic.
I do sense you on crack. Just kidding.
But it is a high.
It is.
It is a high. And it's one of those, really energetic highs.
Right.
Where you just feel really, I would call it blissed out.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I felt that after massages and other kinds of body work, but nothing compares to that blissful feeling when you know that somebody's walking away from you and they have tools now, they have a confidence level, and they're ready to go to work.
Yeah.
They're ready to go in service.
Right.
That's what they've been longing for. It's like finally somebody came up and showed up and said, hey, you're worthy.
Yeah.
Come join the ranks.
Yeah.
And to get that feeling where they're inspired, they're passionate, and they're exploring on their own. They're discovering who they are, and they're really excited about it, and they want to share with you every little thing that happens. This is what's going on, and this is what's going on. And I love that. I really, really do, because that for me is me living my purpose out. And that automatic reciprocal joy that happens of you're living your purpose and I'm living my purpose, and it's all flowing together exactly the way it's supposed to be. Well, hot damn.
I was thinking about this during our last show also. I think one of the ways that the three of us, that I differ from the two of you, is both of you, came upon it and weren't guided through the process. You did a lot of self-guiding, and seeking out modalities and teachings and practices. And for me, I had a guide. I had a teacher that was like, okay, I've already done all that seeking, so I'm going to give you the root of what it is, and here it is, and I'm just going to present it to you. So for me, I'm not as versed in the modalities, and I don't understand, like I said earlier, I'm not as aware of the senses, the clair senses, because it wasn't necessary for me to go, oh, I hear, or I smell, or I do this, or I do that, because I learned to work with energy at its root. So, and one of the things that for myself, working with that teacher, I learned is how important it is to be your own guide. And
Absolutely.
to tap in with your own guidance. And that was one of the things that my, teacher was trying to teach the class, but that was the struggling point for the students in my class, was that most of them weren't receiving their own guidance, and they were struggling in the class as a result of it. They were having a hard time doing the exercises. And for me, one of the first things I did was start getting guidance. It came to me right away, and I'd go to my teacher and I'd be like, well, I was doing your exercise of removing this energy and it wasn't coming out very well. And then this snurgly long hose came down from God, and it was like sucking all the stuff out, and it worked really well. Is that okay? Can I do that? And she's like, well, can I use that snurgly hose? Well, yeah, that's cool. So I was trusting that guidance. And so when I work with my clients, that's the very first thing I do, is teach them how to start feeling the guidance in themselves and how to start receiving that, and how critical that is. And that's when people blow up, when they can tap into that guidance. So to me, that's like the very number one thing we work on, is connecting with yourself and then connecting with your higher self.
Definitely. Well, I get, especially lately, I've got a lot of people who I'm attracting who have that level of guidance, and they're a lot like me and how I was, where I was like, I don't really know what any of this means. I didn't have a lot of people where I could, bounce ideas off. And so the internet was really my best and also worst resource because learning to have a level of discernment, a level of wisdom in your guidance, so that when you're guided to look at certain things, and, I've done a lot of research on modalities, but I may only pick one or two aspects of a modality that feel right to me and pull those out, and not the whole thing. Like Reiki always sounded really cool to me. Like I loved the whole idea of it, but the symbols and things, I could never get those to work for me, because that wasn't something I needed to do. Like that wasn't for me. But the idea of channeling energy, the idea of being attuned to energies, and cosmic and universal conscious energies, those kinds of things, that was kind of, as I read about Reiki, what I picked up from it. So there are definitely a lot of things, and I've had teachers, a few of them, where I've done like intensive courses, and I'll go to the class and be like, oh, I already know a lot of this. Had no idea that this was in my head already. Okay. So it was just confirmation of things I had already taught myself, of, okay, you took a basic intuition class, but you really are more advanced. Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. you know. So however it comes to you, I think is the important thing, how you learn and being open to learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I found about the, because I studied a little bit of Reiki just to kind of see what the difference is between that and what I was doing. But what I usually do, and this is kind of like the quantum approach that I take on things like that, is like I give myself permission to allow it to work. So I did get the symbols to work, but my understanding of the symbols is that it's my consciousness and my intention that gets it to work. So I'm pouring my intention into this symbol, knowing that this symbol is what represents a way of aligning my thoughts and intentions into the intended manifestation that I want. So approaching it from that principle really allows anything to work, no matter what you're working with, what modality or what approach you're working. The baseline importance between all of that is your consciousness, your intention, and your willingness to allow it to work.
Well, in the talk about the symbols, you know, there's a lot of discussion I've had with different healers about symbols, and some are strictly like, you don't use them. You don't use symbols. You don't use you don't know what the energy is that's in there, and you shouldn't be using them. And others are like, no, that organizes and structures the energy, and it puts it in this certain way. And then some have said, well, you're supposed to work really with the energy behind the symbol. So, but I think all of it boils down to, like what you said, it's your intention and your focus and what energy you bring to the table to work with whatever modality you're working in that shapes it.
Well, I think everything you said there is a good point to clarify what's happening when you're working with some sort of symbol or some sort of channeled thing, like because there's different symbols and from different places. Some people channel symbols from ET groups.
Oh, right.
And then so there's that as well. So
somebody was telling me that they'd channeled a symbol from the heart of Gaia from Mother Earth, and I was like, oh, I wouldn't think she'd think in that way. But yeah.
But in regards to those, I mean, we're not just talking about Reiki symbols here. We're talking about all these channeled messages.
Right.
I think all those points were correct. You're not supposed to use symbols. Well, not if you don't know what it is. The energy behind the symbol, okay, tune into it and see what you feel like when you're tuning into it. If this is something that seems like it resonates with you and feels like a good thing, and it feels like what it presents itself to be, then go for it. If you tune into this and it's supposed to be this good thing, but you kind of feel like there's something off with it, don't do it. Don't go with it. Don't use it. Don't tap into it.
Right. Well, it's kind of like when I was first taught, I was taught to ground into the earth and then also to ground into the crystal grid. Have you guys heard of the crystal grid?
Yes.
And for you listeners, if you haven't, the crystal grid essentially is, and please guys correct me if I'm wrong in this, but what I understand it to be is a network created by all the light workers and healers around the world that holds the collective consciousness of them. So when you tap into it, you're tapping into all of these other people with the intention of doing this work and working from the light. And I was taught to, how to pull information from the crystal grid, how to ask questions into the crystal grid, how to put energy in and help charge it yourself. And a lot of the work was done from there. And one of the other students that I'd been working with had asked me, she said, have you been tapping into the crystal grid? And I said, honestly, no, I did when I first started, but it just doesn't feel right to me. And she goes, yeah, it doesn't feel right to me either. I feel kind of icky when I tap into it. And I said, oh, well, maybe that's just not where we're supposed to go. Maybe we're just not supposed to be in that collective. And it was in that time where I realized I really need to trust my instincts and feel okay with it. It's not a bad thing. It's not a judgment. I think that's where we start to get into lack of trust of our instincts and our information, because we fear that we're placing a judgment on that thing. We're saying that is good or that is bad, and therefore where it came from is good or bad. I either accept it or I don't. And I think we have so much talk in our culture right now about being positive and not being judgmental, but there's a difference between being judgmental and being discerning. And you had mentioned that you had mentioned that, Hannah Neal, I do believe. I can't remember. Anyway, it was mentioned to discern what's coming through and feel the energy, like you said about the symbol, Brandon, feeling into it and giving yourself permission to say, that's for me, that's not for me. I'm not saying good, I'm not saying bad, just that's what it is.
Yeah, when we're feeling into it, it's that feeling the energy behind the symbol. Like the person or whatever is presenting it, it may say it's for this thing over here, for a different aspect of consciousness. But if you feel into the energy behind the symbol, that's when you're going to get your answer.
Definitely. Well, and I kind of want to just touch a little bit on the fact that we do still have teachers, light workers who still carry fear. Right. Inside of them. And that's not to say that, I'm completely fearless. No, I still have fears. Mine often show up as anxiety because that's what my body does. But there is a level of spiritual anxiety that's also really important to recognize. Is this mine? Is it not mine? Because I've had people who've given me quote unquote warnings about things, but that is their spiritual anxiety showing up. They've had an experience with something and therefore have labeled it as bad. And so they're sharing that as a warning message, but at the same time, it's clouded with their own energy. So that's why discernment's really important. And that's something that I've really had to learn to trust myself. I had a lot of early religious upbringing, so I was very skeptical of a lot of things. And this was a completely different world from how I was raised. And I was, raised to believe that a lot of this was evil. And that having these other kind of sensory perceptions were evil. So having to let go of all of that for me has been huge. But I've had a lot of people in my life who have put their anxieties and their fears on me of, you're going to get lost in this. This is the way to the dark side. So having to work through some of that ourselves, that's part, again, of this process of coming into your own and trusting yourself. And anxiety and self-doubt, that's the other one. Doubt is the big thing that shows up a lot for me as like a spiritual fear. Yeah. Those two things. So that is a common experience. And that's why it's really important to have support. Right. So that you can have confirmation. If I'm really stuck, because that does happen, I have, both of you guys, I can be like, hey, I'm really stuck on something. Can you give me a level of clarity? Especially when I have like emotional relationship issues and I want to be really mad at people. And,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. That never happened. But
never done that.
Oftentimes that's where some of my own clouded anxiety will show up, and the things and the messages I receive come with levels of that lack clarity. I'll say that they lack clarity. So I can be hearing things that are indicative of the own energies I'm carrying instead of a clearer message. That's when I know I need somebody else. I need a level of, let me talk about this. Let me get this out in the open. Can you give me your experience? And then take that as for what it is. So,
well, when you talk about fear, this was something I think we've been talking a lot about, and when you're talking about love, you have to talk about fear. It's the shadow side of it, right? So, all things exist, and they exist without value. They just exist, and it's our interpretation of them that gives them the value. But when as a worker of light, when you're working from a place where fear is still really playing very predominantly in the role of your work, then you create systems of protection. You create systems of removal. Your focus shifts from being about fostering and nurturing the light inside to eliminating the dark. And I think we miss something when we do that. I think we really miss the valuable lessons, and we have to allow ourselves to drop into that fear and have the fear and be okay with that. But we also have to recognize that that's what it is. And, for instance, I was listening to one person talking about, he was explaining his position on demons and his view of demons and how they're everywhere. But he had said that, that somewhere there's an existence where they're the norm. And they're just trying to survive, and they're just experiencing and existing in their way. It's just that their way hurts and impacts us because it's a deconstructive force for us and we don't know how to process that. And it was an interesting perspective to shift into for me, and it helped me with my own shadow work that way, how I don't have to say that, oh, Jesse, you're so bad because you did this behavior, or you personalized that thing, or you got your feelings hurt. Instead, I can say, oh, that triggered and brought up this intense emotion for me. And now I have an ability to look at it from a different perspective, and I'm not in the trauma state, and reevaluate it. So the fear is a good thing. We don't have to keep protecting ourselves so much from it, I think.
Well, it's also a key point too is not to harbor your fear,
right?
Not to like keep it and be attached to that fear. And what you said, allow yourself to feel it. Allowing yourself to feel the fear is allowing yourself to move through the emotion that you're feeling.
Exactly.
Allowing yourself to bringing up into the light and just looking at it head on and examining what is, and getting to the root of why it's there in the first place. Okay, I'm feeling fear. I recognize that. Mm-hmm. I acknowledge that. Why am I feeling fear? Is it really what I think it is? No, it's not that. It's something else. Well, what is it really? Oh, it's connected to this issue. Mm-hmm. And usually the self-talk around your fear, that's pretty much what it sounds like a lot of the times.
It does. It totally does. I was just doing it yesterday.
Well, I think that oftentimes when I know I did this too. I will not exclude myself from this. When I first started this journey, because it had been such a difficult one to live in my body prior to coming to a level of awareness where I could live in my body, I wanted to live in that bliss. I wanted to feel really good. So that meant that
of the awakening part,
of the awakening process, right? Of the light. I wanted to feel all of those wonderful feelings. And so that for me was eliminating and not believing that I needed to have a shadow side anymore. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm going to live in the light, that means that I have to constantly be in the light. Mm-hmm. And that created a level where it's impossible to do that in this world. Right? Like that is an ideal, and eventually we will return to the wholeness from whence we came. Mm-hmm. But living in this earth means living in duality.
Exactly.
It means experiencing the duality of this world while also experiencing the wholeness of it. Mm-hmm. That you are both this and that at the same time. Mm-hmm. So learning that I had to go to the places that made me feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That's where the fear lies. That's where the work is at. That was a huge part and a huge shift in moving forward for me. And then finding tools. How do I cope with that? Because the ways I had coped in the past with dealing with feeling uncomfortable meant escaping, running away.
Run away!
Right?
Run away.
Get far, far away from here. And I still have those moments where I'm like, if I could just get all my stuff and leave right now, it would be great. But I don't do that. But those things, and finding that I could embrace the shadow side of who I was, that I didn't have to be disappointed in myself for being angry or yelling, finding ways to move through those more uncomfortable emotions that I had previously either through myself or through an opinion of somebody else labeled as bad. Anger tends to be one of those. Mm-hmm. I'm finding that, you know what, I can break all the dishes in my house if I want to when I'm mad. And that's perfectly okay.
I remember the first time I gave myself permission to be angry and break something. That was the best feeling ever. I was like in my mid 30s.
Me too.
I never let myself feel angry, though I had all the reasons in the world to. I would instead respond by feeling hurt or depressed or wounded.
It would silence the anger, right? I would take it inside. Mm-hmm. And I've always believed that anger comes from staying silent too long.
Yes.
And swallowing your emotions. And that's what makes you angry. You're not angry at the other person. You're angry at you because you've not given yourself an outlet to express yourself.
I actually just heard a therapist who he specializes in working with perpetrators of domestic violence and abuse. And he said he gave the best description of anger. And he said it's fear plus another emotion is anger.
Yep. Definitely.
It's so true.
Well, in expressing your anger, what does that look like?
That's what I was going to say is that it's absolutely okay to give yourself permission to be angry, permission to feel these emotions. But you also have to be careful when you're using it as an excuse to be angry. So
Exactly.
I've
Or
known
an excuse for behavior.
right excuse for behavior or to be stuck in your anger, saying I have a right to be angry, and I'm going to be angry all the time because I have this right. You absolutely have that right. But if you want to grow as a person, if you want to grow spiritually, the goal is to allow yourself to feel it, to be able to examine it, and then get behind the root cause. Because if you allow yourself to be triggered or you find yourself being angry all the time in certain situations, or certain types of people anger you, then there's some sort of core patterning or core wounding that exists within you that's presenting itself in order to be healed. So when you find this within yourself, when you find this pattern or this core wound, it may not even seem like it's related to it. And that's kind of the tricky thing, is like, oh, it's from this, and people are like, no, especially headstrong people.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
there.
I don't
Yeah.
either. I
I
don't
think
know.
you should move on.
I'm starting to feel uncomfortable.
But when you allow yourself to go there, and you really allow yourself to unravel this thing, this emotion, whatever it is, and get to the core and deal with your own trigger, then amazing things start happening. You notice that you'll be in similar situations and it won't affect you at all. It's like the energy just kind of went right out of it.
It's like the wind out of the balloon.
And the person who usually, I mean, if you're dealing with a consistent person, it's kind of like you just knocked the wind out of their sail. They have
Right.
nothing to move forward on with you because you don't react the same way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who feed off that energy from you, and they don't. There's no reason to, so the whole situation will just cease often.
Well, I had mentioned earlier that I just was going through something yesterday, and I'm going to share it briefly because I think it's a great illustration of what you just said. So, I was having an experience with my husband, and he basically made a joke out of something that referenced a really big issue for us, which is poor behavior, and then turning himself into the victim about it. And then crying, but you don't know what I'm going through, and and I'm like, wait, you just did something to me though. Wait a minute. So we had this whole dynamic, and it was very, very unfortunate, and I participated in it wholly, but I couldn't see that. I felt like he was always doing it to me. He was always creating this situation. He created the negative environment, and then he claimed the status of the victim in the environment, and I just couldn't. It was a real problem in our marriage. It is a real problem in our marriage. And he said to me at one point yesterday, in a way that I was actually able to hear him for the first time, I don't know that this is my problem, that I don't think I created this, Jesse, and I feel like your response is out of proportion to what I just said and what I have done. And I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to know that, but I took it in, and I went, and I was like, okay, I'm going to ground myself. I'm going to connect. I'm just going to bring that source energy, and through that issue, whatever comes to me, I'm going to let it come in, and I'm going to let myself feel it. And yes, I sobbed my head off. And what I went to was all the way back. I had never even thought of this, how as a child, my main abuser, always claimed the status of the victim. You don't understand. It's not my fault. I'm doing this. And I just don't know how to express myself to you. And I love you too much. And all these things, making me responsible for the behavior. And that was a piece that I couldn't get at in therapy. I couldn't reach that through therapy, no matter, the EMDR processing that we did, the hypnosis type work we did. I can't even think of all the different ways that we approached it over the 10 years I was working with her. And I could never get into that, really. But once I flooded that with source and opened that up and was real about what was popping up and the memories and who that little girl was, and connecting in with her and filling her with love and light, I was suddenly like, oh my God, I am creating this scenario with him. I need this energy to be there so that I would learn this, so that I'd remember and go back to that little girl and help her again and help that part of myself. And it did. It just took all the wind right out of it. It was like I was literally sobbing, tears dripping on the floor off of me. And it was just gone the second I realized that. And then I just was able to then shift my focus completely away from him. Had nothing to do with my husband. It really had nothing to do with my abuser either. It was all about that little girl just needs to be held and loved and filled with light and filled with love and shown that it's okay and that I am protecting her. And it's in that way we do that deep shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear of avoiding it just made me recreate it over and over and over and over with every person, every partner I was with. So it's in that way that we can stop running from our fear, I think, and face it.
Right. We'll give it a way to be expressed and validated. I always talk about when because I'm a really emotional person. I've always been really emotional. That's kind of how I sense the world, is how I feel about it. And so much of the work I've had to do is validating my own experience. And I had most of my life given that validation to other people.
Right.
I need you to validate my experience as being right or wrong. Oh, I'm wrong. Okay, well, I'll just stop doing that then. Mm-hmm. And so giving myself healthy outlets for expression of my emotions, especially really intense ones, because in my family, intense emotions were not allowed. It just was not, you controlled yourself. That was a level of control. Mm-hmm. I am controlling myself when I express myself because I won't be violent, but there are sometimes things I need to do to, sometimes that's yelling. And I'm not saying about yelling at somebody else and, hurling words, but sometimes I'll turn on really loud music.
Right.
And I will scream and I will dance and I will, whatever I need to do to move energy. Sometimes that's getting on the treadmill. Whatever I need to do to move energy and what feels right for me. It's dancing in my underwear to a Bruce Springsteen song. Or if that...
which one?
Any of them? Or, we talk about Pink Floyd, things like that. Whatever you need. Sometimes it's Rage Against the Machine. It could be any number of things, but whatever it is that I need at that moment. I used to worry that my neighbors would think I was really crazy because I thought maybe they would hear me screaming, like just screaming in my house because I needed to scream. I needed to find a level of where my voice was at so I could get to the point where I could feel my emotions, because sometimes my anger gets in the way. It gets in the way of my sadness. It gets in the way of other things that I'm feeling. And it all comes out as anger because that for me was the most appropriate emotion. So
Yeah, I've had times where I was worried about what the neighbors might think. So I drove to the middle of nowhere and screwed my head off. That was especially true when I was still working with triggers of my own with my ex.
Yeah. A lot of the relationship issues have their cores in that place because you're talking about a lot of early childhood formations of relationships. How do we communicate, with ourselves, with other people? How are we understood? How are we validated? And so those things, as we said, will just keep coming up over and over and over and over until you deal with them.
Right.
And sometimes you need that extreme expression to get that energy out of the way, so then you can take a step back and go, okay, now let's look at this.
Absolutely.
Well, and I was having this other, after I'd kind of, recovered from that experience yesterday, I had this other moment where I, a healer once told me, your energy is very stubborn, Jesse. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And
not my energy.
And I think in that week I had
stubborn.
3 other people mention to me about how stubborn I was. And I'm like, I'm not liking this message at all. And it really became unavoidable. I
think I remember that week.
I think you do too. Yeah. And it was so hard. It's still very hard for me to process because I don't think of myself as stubborn at all. And I was looking at it and I thought, oh my God, Jesse, you've been in a marriage that most people look at and call the Olympics of marriage. They're shocked at the fact that I'm still trying, that we're still working, because my husband and I are both the most stubborn people I know. And it really sunk in yesterday. And I was really looking at it and I'm like, oh my God, for 13 years I've been playing this dynamic out almost on a daily basis, and I'm just now getting it. Oh, Jesse, that's what stubborn is. And I started to look back and look at all these other aspects. So I'm just going to throw this out as an offer. If you're finding that your life is so hard and it just keeps being so hard, you might just be a bit stubborn. And it's okay. We're still lovable, even though we're stubborn.
Yes, we love you, Jessie.
Thank you.
We love you, stubborn
I
Jessie.
still need to hear that because, I'm stubborn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to a degree we kind of all are. I mean, that's a human thing, right? There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. But I'm fine. I remember there was at one point in my life before a lot of this journey happened where I had actually sought the help of a psychologist. And it was sort of a last resort for me because I had had some bad experiences with psychiatry and psychology in the past, and I didn't want to go back on medication, but I was clearly having some issue. So I came in for my first appointment, and the woman asked me, she said, so why are you here today? And I said, well, I seem to be having some issues with my home life, with my relationships with my family. I'm having some issues with my work relation. Okay, I'm having relationship issues all over the spectrum. And I think I finally decided it's not all of them. It probably has something to do with me.
Right.
And that was sort of I had spent the last, 2 years blaming everyone else in my life for the things that were going wrong. It was my then husband's fault. It was the job I had. It was the boss I had. It was all of these things when there was clearly a pattern arising that I was the main thing that was the same thing throughout all of it. The continuity was me.
Right.
And it's like, so maybe there's an issue there. And that for me actually opened up a whole new world because she did a lot of art therapy, which I really loved because it allowed the intuitive part of myself to have a voice and to come out and be able to express itself in some of my most unconscious and subconscious ways. So a lot of my early artwork and drawings was a lot of trauma stuff. I see it now. I didn't then. But a lot of wounded healing. There was a lot of my art is very intuitive because I never know what I'm going to put on the paper or the canvas when I'm there doing it. It's just, I'll pick a color, I'll pick a movement, and these shapes and oftentimes animals will start to form. There will be letters, there will be things I'll see when the piece is done that I had absolutely no intention of putting into it.
So how would you tell somebody else, like one of our listeners, to use artwork as an intuitive tool for intuition building?
Well, art therapy and art expression is really, it's a lot like intuition. It's a blending of your imagination and your intuitive abilities. We have this idea of what art is. So taking that frame of reference, whatever you think art is, and put it to the side. Because I know I was one of those people who was like, I don't draw. I don't paint. I don't do any. I don't have talents. I can't, draw. I can draw stick people. But my art is all about how I want to see things and how I want to put it on the canvas. So owning what it is that you want. I want the color green and I want it to go here. And not making a judgment of this is going to be the ugliest thing on the planet. Because that's what I hear a lot with people when they first start making art. And go to some place where there's a lot of artists who are also really spiritual people. So if you need a mentor in that area, find a group of people who are just getting together to make art and not judging it. There is actually a studio here in Portland where that's a lot of the early classes I took were just getting together in a huge art room where there were a lot of supplies and just crafting, making something. And she would take a lot of Osho or Rumi quotes and be like, this is the quote we're going to use for today. However that works for you is really individualized. So sometimes we'd have like a block of wood and you could staple or glue or paint or do whatever you wanted with it, but just create.
Well, and it seems there's a lot more shamanistic art therapies being offered now. I see a lot on the meetups. There's a lot of opportunities for that. So, yeah, definitely look in your area for groups that will help you expand that. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, it's a really good way to build intuition because, again, when you're not judging things and you're allowing, a lot of intuition is what we understand as imagination. It's that crossover area. So when you're creating from nothing, that's intuitive because you're not going with any kind of guidance because nothing exists. So you're creating. So that's the very core of a lot of intuition is just going with the flow, being open to it. However that picture or that drawing or whatever it is that you're creating, just create. It doesn't have to be a Rembrandt. It doesn't have to be a Van Gogh. It can be a Jessie. It can be a Brandon.
One of the things that Noelani had mentioned when she asked the question was that she really likes how-to information. Like, how do I do that? How do I do this? And we had talked a little bit about, for the show, doing some little intuition building exercises. Brandon, did you want to lead them through that yes-no exercise?
Well, I was just going to add on real quick to the artwork.
Oh, yeah.
So another exercise that I actually did in a psychic development class that I took when I was looking for community was really cool. You just got a bunch of magazines together, and you had these big cards, and you cut out whatever you felt like in the magazine, and any cool picture that you were drawn to, and you collage, and you put it on this thing, and you usually don't know what it's going to be until it's done. And there were some really interesting pictures that got out of that. And at the end, there was a stack of cards, and so the teacher would use these stack of cards, and everybody would go through and pick one. And so you didn't get your own card, so you often got somebody else's, and you would just go through. And it's really interesting because no matter what you're going through, there was often a way to interpret the card perfect for them, and no two people would interpret the card the same way because there was so much hidden in the picture. And they're saying, well, I see da-da-da-da, and for my life, this da-da-da-da, and so this is happening here, and it would be perfect for whatever their situation is. So it's kind of like the interpretation and intuition of whatever that picture was speaking to them on, and that was another way of building intuition. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So the exercise I wanted to lead everybody through is something I do with a lot of my friends when we're looking for guidance. And I call it the yes and no exercise. And it's a really good intuition tool when you allow yourself to develop it further and using more of your senses. Some people, it can be a little bit hard to get used to at first because they're waiting for something to happen, or it's the way it's like they interpret the information. But what you do is you have somebody else think of a question in yes or no format. And then the person getting it doesn't have to be in yes or no format. You can use choices and numbers. But to start with, I would definitely stick to yes and no for the easiest way to start. And then if you're doing the reading, the other person is going to hold their intention on their question and kind of project this question towards you. And if you're doing the reading, you're going to tap into this. And what I do is I picture yes on one side and no on the other. And so I'll see the words form there. And I'll kind of see what the words do when I think of the picture or think of the question. And sometimes they'll do different things. And it's the characteristics of how they act and how they feel. Because sometimes the answer comes in a more of a clairsentient matter. Sometimes it's very clairvoyant. So sometimes I'll see the yes just grow really big and tall and then no disappear. I'm like, okay, that's obviously a yes, and it's a really big yes right now. Other times it's kind of like I'll see the no and it will move along and then disappear, and then like a yes will pop up. I'm like, oh, that was different. So that to me means like it's going to be no for a while, and then there's going to be something happen, and sometimes you'll get more intuitive information on it as you get better with your senses. So you might get there's going to be some sort of shift that happens, and then it will be a yes. Or so it all depends on what you're getting with it, and you can get it in different ways. You can get it in more of a claircognizant way, but really allow yourself to open up to any form of how this appears to you, and don't judge it. But that's the main thing. And if you don't see a yes or a no, see the words, just imagine what it'd be like to feel them there. So imagine yourself holding the word yes or holding the word no, and see what happens. Which one feels more prominent? Which one draws you to it? And That's the way I do a lot of like kind of self-checking. Sometimes if you're really wrapped up into a situation and you're kind of too close to it emotionally, it's hard to see the truth because our emotions often cloud our intuition. And many intuitives that I've seen have thought they were intuiting something, and it's really been a strong emotional component that was more or less taking control of what they were getting, even if they did get a shred of truth in there. So sometimes when things seem really big for yourself, and you have friends you can do this with, that's a good way to check. But you can use it as a game to start out with. So just get a couple friends together and think about things that you know the answer to, and then have them feel into it, and then vice versa, and then really develop your skills that way. And that's a really good way to start feeling what your yeses and nos feel like in your body.
So that kind of another thing we had talked about doing on the show was a little meditation, and I think that would lead us into a great meditation that we can do with people on the show. Mm-hmm. So we're coming close to the end, so we'll take this last little bit of time, and I'm going to go ahead and lead the meditation.
Yeah.
So what I'd like for all of you guys to do is to take a few moments and a few deep breaths and take note of where you're at. Like, where are you at in your body? Are you sitting in a chair? Are you driving? If you're driving and you want to participate in this exercise, please pull over. So take a few moments and take a few deep breaths and call all of yourself back into yourself right now, not thinking about other things, other places, other people. And bring your focus to your body. How is it sitting? Am I sitting comfortably? And start to bring that attention down into the lower parts of your body, like your feet, and focus your energy down there and grow some roots down from your feet into the earth. Sending those roots down deeper. Allowing, if you have anxieties or fears or heavy emotions, let those drive those roots even deeper and faster and thicker. Letting yourself ground deeply. Many of us have different grounding rituals. And if you have something else that works better, go ahead and use that at this time. But really let yourself connect into the earth and feel that vibration in the feet. Feel them growing and thickening and swelling. And bringing that energy up through your body, from your feet, up through your legs, and up through your abdomen. Feeling it as it travels. And bring it up through your shoulders and arms, up through your head, and then send that energy up and out of your head, allowing it to connect into that source, that feeling of aha moments. And then let that energy come down through the body and start feeling how these things feel as they travel through your body. That source energy coming down through the crown, down through your head, down through your throat and your shoulders and arms, down through the abdomen, all the way down the legs and out the feet. And now in this place where your body feels really receptive and you're already tuned into it, ask your body to show you, what does a yes feel like? What does it feel like when I want to move towards something? Feel the sensations, whatever they may be. Don't judge them. Don't try to hold them. Show me a strong yes. Now show me what a no feels like in my body. Move away from that. A no. Notice the difference in the body and the sensation. Go back into a yes and begin to teach your body how to communicate with you, that you're listening, that you're receiving this information. And now you can begin to ask yourself questions. You can ask yourself anything you want. Should I spend more time in this place? I usually get a yes. should I eat this apple? It's in this way that we can connect in with our body and give our body a voice and use it as it is intended, as a purely a receptor of energy. So I hope that will help all of you guys. And again, try to take a few moments out of your day, and the more you give yourself opportunities to practice this feeling, to practice feeling energies in your body, to listen and respond to what you're feeling, the more you're going to feel, and the more you'll understand and grow. Balancing the body with your energies. And when you're in that state, you can ask your body, what do I need? Am I drinking enough water? Am I sleeping enough? What do I need? What can I do better to support myself? All of these are ways that you can begin that self-inquiry process. Brandon?
I was just going to say, before we end that meditation process, or before you go about the rest of your day, make sure you really ground yourself back into your body.
Oh, yeah.
And really come back to your present moment.
Right. Yes, that's exactly a good point.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when that happens, you will notice that your surroundings and your awareness is slightly different. When you've gotten to a place where you have that feeling of yes and no, and you can feel that sensation in your body, and when you come back to it, sometimes when you open your eyes, things will look different. Mm-hmm. There's sometimes a level of clarity that you can find in your everyday life.
So why don't we go around and share what those yeses and nos feel like for each one of us, to give our listeners a sense of what that might be for them and what they're feeling, or maybe a little clarity. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I feel a yes, just in my body, I'm not doing the visualization yes and no's in front of me. It also correlates to that too, most of the time. But it feels very expansive in my heart. It feels very invigorating, like this energy kind of pushing out. It's like, yes, it's kind of almost like when you get excited about something right before you get excited. That's that feeling of that yes. And then feeling the absolute, and these are the absolutes of them. And then when you get better at feeling the yes and no, you'll feel variations of that, like I was mentioning, the movement of the no, or the bump, or how the yes might tip over to one side or the other. It all depends on the person's question too, because that can also influence the behavior of what you're seeing. But my no is as a complete restriction, a constriction, where it kind of draws itself back into my heart, and I kind of withdraw. The energy that's pushing out withdraws back into myself. And that's really what the pure yeses and nos feel for me.
Mm-hmm. I have something really, really similar. When I get a yes in my body, it feels like I'm projecting out of my upper chakras. Mm-hmm. It feels like my head kind of feels a little on fire, and it's all this wonderful, yummy excitement energy of yes. And the absolute no, a lot of that, it feels like a density in my feet. Mm-hmm. Like the energy transitions, it pulls in and then it moves a little lower. So it feels like my feet are a little heavier. It feels like the lower part of my body is no. That's what the no feels like for me. So I get upper and lower.
Nice.
For me, when I get a yes, I get this tingling that starts at the back of my head, right at the base of my spine, and it radiates up and over my scalp and over my crown, and then it feels like the whole thing just is bursting, depending on the degree of yes that I'm getting. When I get a no, it all like flushes down into my jaw and into my lower part of my face, and it feels very heavy, and it feels like a constrictive no. And like you said, there's other things that I feel too. Like I get one where it's skirting the issue, and it's like the energy is swirling around my head. And at first I was so confused what that was, but it made a lot more sense once I understood what it was.
Yep. Clarify the question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're missing the point. Yeah. I think for me also, because when I first started talking with my guides, I used a pendulum to do that. So I learned a lot of different ways that the pendulum could communicate with me. It wasn't just circling yes or no. Excuse me. It would actually point towards things, or it would do this half circle where it would cut the circle in half and then go around. I'm only seeing this piece of it. I'm not getting the whole view yet. And I realized, there's a whole lot more than just yes and no. So as I started using my body instead of using a tool like a pendulum, then I started to be able to go, there are these other ways. Like sometimes I just move to the left, or move to the right. And really it's that you're dodging the issue, whatever it may be.
So that's beautiful. I love how we all have our own unique ways of viewing those within our body. And that should give you out there listening a clue of there is no right or wrong way to feel this. It's however it shows up for you. And every way is appropriate as long as it's what works for you and it's authentic to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people feel tingling in their hands. Maybe they'll feel it on one side or the other. I have a friend who, when she gets a yes, she always wants to lift up her left leg. Like that's how she knows it's a yes, because she wants to lift up her foot. And she's like, but that's just how she reads. And the no is she wants to keep that foot down. Yeah. Sometimes it's really that simple, but really learning to recognize your body's signals in response to that energy is what's really important. And knowing that's unique to you. That's your little unique expression of source coming through. And that's amazing.
And there is times where you may not like what your body's showing you. And you can change those too. So I used to be in situations where somebody was saying something that I knew wasn't quite right, and my body would start telling me by making my eye twitch. I'm like, oh, stop that. It's so annoying. Right, can you just, I get it. Stop it. And then, I had to kind of allow myself to feel it in another way and ask. I'm like, okay, let's do this differently. Okay, there we go. All right, I can deal with that. I just don't want the body twitching.
Right. Yeah, I actually, whenever I'm getting messages, like my eyes will start to kind of twitch and do weird things. And I'm always like, can't you just, I always think of Brandon like, no, okay, now you're going to show me this in another way. So I don't look like a freak while I'm sitting here.
Like twitchy.
But my body just doesn't listen as well as Brandon's. I'm not thinking that's the stubbornness, is it?
Well, there is a certain degree of acknowledgement of control that you have to recognize that you have over your body, and then allowing that to be so, because your body is this big, huge communication mechanism through billions of cells, trillions of cells, and
which only 1 out of 10 are actually human cells. It's true. We're outnumbered in our body with human cells.
Well, what are the others?
I'm getting the look. It's a community of other cells, of bacteria, of fungi, of all sorts of other things that live within us that are a collective. Our intestines especially, our digestive tract is extremely populated. But it's a community. We really are a community organized and communicating with itself all the time.
So communicate with your community.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's interesting that actually just triggered me to say something about your intestinal tract. You were talking about when we're formed as humans, the energy that the cells that separate, and early on in that separation process, we've got our major organs like our brain, our heart. Well, our intestines are made from that same neural net. Yeah. When we talk about the gut instinct, right? Your guts. Your guts remember a lot of things.
Well, you have brain cells in your gut, and you have brain cells in your heart as well.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like they're all cut from the same neural net.
Yeah.
So those neurons that are in your brain and those neurons that are in your heart are also in your intestinal tract, which is why, intestinal health is really important, because that is, just like we feed our brain and we feed our heart, we're feeding our guts too. And they have so much receptivity, to energy. When we say, those gut feelings, it's usually in the gut. I've just been punched in the gut energetically. it's that neural net responding in the same energetic form that we understand our heart and our brains do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and now that we have so much imaging, so much 3-dimensional imaging, they've done some really fascinating things where they've created images just of our neural networks. And we have just as complicated of a neural network in our chest as we do in our brain. The difference is that the brain has associative abilities. It can cross-reference information where the body can't. So the body stores, it feels, it experiences, and it holds. Whereas the brain, we can have these memories and then it's cross-referencing and it's still thinking about, it's processing, and then it tucks things away and it forgets things. We actually forget a lot, but our body doesn't ever forget until we allow it to feel and process through it. It's fascinating.
Well, going back to something I mentioned on the previous show, is that the heart will respond and intuit something up to 7 seconds before an event. And the brain is slower than that.
Yeah, it's cross-referencing.
Well, what happens is cross-referencing. But it's the signal that's received from the heart first,
right,
and then sent to the brain. At least that's what it's indicating.
Yes.
And then the brain will respond, and then the person will think about it.
Yes. Well, the first thing to develop in the womb is the heart.
Mm-hmm.
When you're first pregnant and you go in and they're doing the ultrasound to see if you're actually pregnant, all there is this little pulp. Well, it's very fast actually, but
right,
there's just this
right,
heartbeat,
the little peanut heartbeat,
right? And in my pregnancy, there were some challenges, and so I had a lot of them ultrasounds, and watching him develop, from a heart. Oh, now he's got his little brain starting, and oh look, now he's, so brain and heart. That's what we start as, But first we start as heart, so we are all heart, and everything comes from there. So feel it in your heart, people. Bring it into the heart.
Definitely.
Which is the root of how the three of us work energy.
Mm-hmm.
Is from the heart, in the heart, and with our hearts. Which
Absolutely
is, I think, the perfect way to wrap up this show. I think we're over our time. And again, you can email us at TheCrystalCocoon@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. We've got the page where you can see what's news and what's going on with us, or you can join our group discussion in the group, The Crystal Cocoon, on Facebook also.
Yay, discussion.
We love talking. I don't know if you can tell that, but we really do like to talk.
And that's an open group, so it's although it is definitely admin, people who join the group, you're welcome to interact and post things that you find interesting or questions, or please come be part of the discussion.
Yeah. You can also find us on Twitter and Tumblr and iTunes, all at The Crystal Cocoon. And I think that's about it. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And we'll see you
next time. Thank you.